Is the new media in danger of being conquered by saboteurs, by crazies, zanies who might be more appropriate on the far left but have joined the right instead? Well, that's what Dr. Jordan B. Peterson is alleging, and he's facing major backlash as a consequence. Today, we'll dive in and let you know what we think about what's going on with the personalities vying for conquering the new media. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure and honor, and we are happy to have you come our way. An attitude of gratitude every single time that you decide to play us on your device and share your day with us. Today, we're diving into a very deep topic, a longer video than usual, but we think it's necessary for you to find out what's going on and for us to convey exactly what we think about the situation where Dr. Jordan Peterson, a stalwart defender and supporter of logic and manners, responsibility, etc. on the right, is now facing significant ire from some of those who purport to be on the right. We'll explain it and tell you whether or not he'll be all right at the end, and whether or not this is a message that wins with audiences in need of a new source of media. All right, well, let's keep going because, folks, we've got the spicy story of the day. We'll see how we handle it. We'll get underway with it right now, and it is that there is a civil war brewing, maybe undoing the efforts of the new media. Let's dive in right now. Ladies and gentlemen, take a look at this. It is out of, get on the screen there. Yeah, get on the screen. It's from Yakaboy, and it's really from Joe Rogan, so we're just using Yakaboy. Sorry, Yakaboy, we're just using you. Jordan Peterson warns the right, without drawing clear lines against grifters and nonsense, you'll implode just like the left did with wokeism. Now, Dr. Jordan Peterson is a clinical psychologist out of Canada who's gained fame, has done the 10 Rules for Life, all those kinds of things. And so he's gained notoriety. And he is calling out that he sees people trying to take over the conservative new media movement for their own purposes. And I guess what I would say about this is his position is that there's an attempt to derail what we've been covering, the death of the legacy media and the incoming of a new media on X and YouTube, etc. Here's what Joe Rogan had to say about this, here's what Jordan Peterson had to say on Joe Rogan about the situation. We'll play just a little bit of it.
You also set that conversation up, but it poked up and made itself manifest in that conversation. And the issue is, how do you identify the psychopathic pretenders? And it's even worse now, and then make a barrier, right? Now, the right was calling for the left to do that for decades, and they didn't, and they couldn't. And the left is not good at drawing barriers, partly temperamentally. The right is somewhat better, but there's no shortage of monstrosity there. And so then the question is, how do you draw the line? And that's kind of what I was, because I've been watching these right-wing, they're not right-wing, these psychopathic types manipulate the edge of the conservative movement.
All right, let's hold there. I want to go through what it is that Peterson is positing. From at Local Lib says, I don't give a cuss whether you like Jordan Peterson or not, but this post is too perfect to pass on by. Peterson has essentially given a clinical name to the term grifter. What is it? Well, here's Peterson himself. 10 markers of political psychopathology. Self-positioning at the extreme edge of group or ideological identity. Repeated public claims of ideological or religious identity, purity to garner attention, increase social rank. Pattern of repeated public protest. False cries of victimization. Aggressive calls for reparation or vengeance. Absence of remorse, guilt, or empathy. Dramatic theatrical behavior and extreme emotional variability, reputation, savaging, social exclusion, and mobbing, extreme entitlement, self-aggrandizement, heightened instability in and fragility of interpersonal and social relationships. Now, what Peterson is coming out and talking about is that he believes there are people who are sabotaging the new media experience. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know how people are going to respond to us saying this, but this is not being well received by some individuals. I'm going to use this as an example. Cernovich. Now, this is where we might get in trouble, but we're going to go there. Cernovich is saying Jordan Peterson is accusing people who disagree with him on foreign wars of being mentally ill. This is Stasi level stuff. He also wants to tie this particular quote to sociopathy and terrorism. This man is working for the demons. That cannot be doubted now. He goes on to talk about Peterson's appearance on Hannity. I'll play a brief snippet of that as well.
Well, I think the most important thing to do first is to draw a distinction between
the political and the psychological, and not to collapse them together. So imagine this. Imagine that there's a group of individuals, about 4% of the population, who have a set of personality characteristics that have been described as dark tetrad. So they're Machiavellian. They use their language to manipulate. They're narcissistic. They want unearned social status and reputation. They're psychopathic, which makes them free of empathy and parasitical and predatory. And they're sadistic. So they take positive delight in the unnecessary suffering of others.
All right, let's hold there. Carrie, I'm going to go to you first. You, I think, are well aware of what it is that Dr. Peterson is discussing. Could you help us distill this so that people out there who are listening in can understand what is the warning that he's giving and what is the pushback he's receiving? What is this all about?
Well, Jordan Peterson's spot on, first of all, and he's not saying anything different than what he's been saying for years. And he's not the only one saying it. In fact, cluster B personality disorder, psychopathy, borderline personality disorder, these sort of things are things that many people who've been speaking out against woke ideology, including myself, including my friend Josh Slocum, who runs his whole podcast is called Disaffected, and it's about understanding woke ideology through the lens of psychology and understanding it as being related to cluster B. So what he's saying is, it may be the first time some people have heard it, but I don't think it's that shocking. It's what people have been talking about for 8 years. We are just used to hearing it discussed about the woke left. And I think what is getting people riled up is he's saying this is not, no political side or party has an immunity from pathological people coming in and taking advantage. And I kind of like that tweet that you showed that said he gave a psychological term to grifting, because it is grifting. Think about when you think of a con man, think about the 90s and the mega church, the preachers who were fake and we think of as grifters and snakes and con men. Con men throughout history, they always come into a belief system where there are sincere believers and they take advantage of those believers. And so this has always happened, even in talking about and trying to diagnose the woke left. When I first became a Christian, I remember reading the Bible and reading parts where Jesus was talking about wolves in sheep's clothing. And I was like, oh my goodness, he's talking about it in the Bible. He's talking about grifters and con artists, like people who come in, who have an allegiance first and foremost at the top of their hierarchy of importance. At the top for them is fame, power, money, these sort of pursuits. And that's why they contradict themselves all the time, because they'll say anything. They don't actually have an allegiance to the ideas, whatever ideology they're speaking. And I know I'm talking quite a bit, but I'll give you an example of someone on the right, used to be, another supposedly former leftist like myself, Candace Owens. I regret ever sharing anything of hers now, because I'm watching her and I'm like, this woman is a full-blown narcissist who will say anything. And I've had some people saying, look, she's not anti-Semitic. I'm like, I agree. I don't think she's anti-Semitic either. I think she's saying anti-Semitic things because she'll say anything. And that's what's becoming popular and is being pulled out of the fringes of the so-called right. One last thing, and I know you guys will have a lot to say, and I have more to say too. But
you're getting a follow-up, Carrie. Don't even think you get a break on the way. You've got a follow-up coming.
Just quickly, I remember when Peterson was first speaking out against woke ideology. At that time, we were all still calling it social justice ideology. This was about 8 years ago, and he was going on these same shows and podcasts, and he was saying, at that time, the left has no limiting principles. The left they don't set up any boundaries. They don't know how to restrain the fringe, the dark and dangerous elements in their midst, right? But the right does have boundaries. They exclude those people. And the things that the left is saying about the right are not true. The right is not full of white nationalists and racists and Nazis and all this stuff that the left says. That's not true. They actually push those people to the margins. And at the time, I completely agreed. And it was like, look, the right is keep those crazy nut jobs out. Well, now flash forward 8 years, and the MAGA movement is this great coalition of based people, which for me, based just means reality based. It's people who are not in that woke cult. It can be anything: libertarian, former liberals, classical liberals, conservatives. This whole coalition came together. We had this moment of success in the US. Trump even picked several liberals for his cabinet. We've got liberals came together and helped to vote for Trump. We got this huge coalition. And now what is happening is there is this crazy culture war that's now brewing on the so-called right. And I'm starting to see people who normally were kept to the fringes, those ideas are slightly becoming more popular, especially online. And people are saying crazy stuff that sounds very woke, very collectivist. It's identitarian. They're saying stuff like Elijah Schaffer. I was on his show. I regret now what he's out there saying Black people are not American. That white men need to recognize their racial consciousness. That they're not even hiding the woke. It's like you're speaking just like woke. You're just rearranging the identity groups. Your lens is the same.
Right. So it's a return to tribalism. Let me ask you this, Carrie.
Yeah.
So stepping away from the personalities and moving into the ideologies that are being espoused, how do we differentiate between those who are falling prey to what might be decided to be bad ideas and bad concepts that would then obviously make for a worse off world? How do we differentiate between the people who have been tricked at permanently, temporarily by bad ideas versus those who are legitimately conning their audience and intentionally grifting and intentionally sidetracking the new media effort? How do we know the difference between those two people? Because they're qualitatively different in how we should respond to them.
Well, this is sort of similar with the woke left. So for years, I've been saying about the woke left, it's look at the people who lead the movement, the so-called like the high priests and priestesses of the woke left, people like Robin DiAngelo, people like Michael Eric Dyson. These people I do think of as con artists and grifters. They're in it for power, fame, money. I don't think they even believe the stuff they're saying. But a lot of the followers are sincere. Now, hear me out. They're still in something that I believe to be an evil ideology. It's a racist ideology. It's sexist. It's collectivist. It's authoritarian. But they think they have been conned. A lot of them, they believe that they're fighting racism. They believe. And so those are the people I try to talk to and deprogram, because I've seen those people come out of the left. My audience is built up of a lot of people who woke up and left that cult. And so how do you differentiate? Well, one thing would be to see if their behaviors match their words or if they contradict themselves all the time. So if you are telling me, for example, that you don't agree with woke because it's racist, if you can correctly see that woke ideology is racist towards white people, for example, which it is, and there are some people who are now saying this in this so-called woke right, whether you like that phrase or not. I have seen some of these people saying, they are saying racism is not real. Okay. They're saying racism is not real. It doesn't exist except against white people, because woke is racist against white people. And I'm like, that's so weird, because the woke left says racism is not real and it doesn't exist except against people of color. It's mirror image. And so if you're saying something that doesn't make sense logically, you're trying to get people to believe, like, to nurse their resentment and to say, look, you guys can all see the racism against white people. Yes. And we can. Yes. But then they're selling you this boat. They're selling you this lie that's like, and it's only against white people. It's impossible against people of color. That's a bridge too far. You're trying to do the same thing the other side was doing. I'm sorry.
No, that was great. I want to throw something in here that's a little bit basic, and it's an older idea here. When Christopher Nolan was making Dark Knight Rises, in the middle of the production of that movie, the Occupy Wall Street thing happened. And by the time the trailer came out, there was Occupy Wall Street sentiment, because it was very much like eat the rich kind of mentality in there. And he's like, well, how did you predict this and this? Are you saying the Occupy Wall Street is evil? And the media was kind of, backing the Occupy Wall Street people because they needed an enemy of the day or whatever. But he said something that always stuck with me. Is the fact that an ideology can be co-opted by evil, does that mean that the ideology is always evil? And I don't think that is the case. And no. What we look at with wokeism has a basis, as a kernel of truth in it, and that we all need to be treated equal. Well, then, of course, then it gets turned into something that is the opposite of equal. And the same thing on the right, where you even see Christians who will take a phrase like Christ is king, which if you're a Christian and you don't believe that, then maybe you're not a Christian. But I've seen it turned into a political phrase that would question whether or not, if I were in the position of some of the people who I've seen say it, also attaching vulgar phrases to it, whether or not it's in fact taking the Lord's name in vain to use Christ as king as a political phrase, or a phrase about whether or not you're behind some country that you will never have contact with. I think that there are people with bad motives on both sides. I am not saying that that excuses anything. I think, especially with Jordan Peterson, he is a guy with so many words that I agree wholeheartedly with some of the things he says, but maybe not so much on a few of the fringe things. I'm seeing a lot more people where there's a much higher percentage of things I don't agree with, even though they would say that they agree with me or that I need to get on board with their stuff.
Yes.
Well, the response from Cernovich is very powerful. I know, Culture, you've got to hop off. Culture, do you want to give your thoughts on the topic? I don't know if you even have time. You're welcome to do so if you can. If not, we'll send people over to the Culture Casino channel as fast as we can. Culture, your thoughts.
Look, there's always going to be people who sneak into, the edges of these different movements. We're going to see that over and over again. Oftentimes, I think, we misuse the word grifter. So hopefully Jordan Peterson was, trying to just point out that there are peoples who will do whatever it takes to remain in the spotlight. Those are more narcissistic tones to me than they are for many others. But I recognize that all the time, because in the space that we all share here on this panel, we see that all the time. We see people, rise and fall based on, a level of narcissism that I can't fathom. But some of those people are also actors, actresses. I mean, anybody who's that dedicated to being that self-involved and that self-aggrandizing, definitely has missing elements elsewhere, oftentimes moral ones, and they're incapable of finding the edges, as Carrie talks about, because they don't see them. So they're willing to exceed and expand beyond a rational or moral framework. And they'll say whatever it is that comes to mind that is just on the edge of what somebody else has said, because they want to get that attention. I think Jordan Peterson himself at times has been guilty of doing that, but not to an immoral end. Somebody like Candace Owens is a little disturbing to me, because like Carrie, I found her to be, intriguing and usually in line with things. And a lot of what she said has been fairly accurate if you look at some of the stuff that's happened within the Daily Wire and other places. But at the same time, she's often drawing attention to the wrong thing and in the wrong way. And again, that's an opinion of mine. I don't know about anybody else sharing that, but I think that we're going to see more and more of that, because we literally have two generations that are driven by their narcissism. I think that perhaps psychopath is a little strong, because it's possible that I understand that, Carrie, but because oftentimes, psychopaths, have no care for others, and psychopathy means you have little regard for anyone or anything, which would include family members. And yet Candace Owens in particular has great affinity and affection for her family and her children. So I can't really allow that to rise to that level, but I do understand that sociopath, perhaps to a limited extent, but a psychopath just doesn't care, and they'll do anything to get from point A to point B. And while some of that may apply to these people, maybe not entirely. Regardless, Jordan said some controversial things. I think that he does that from time to time in a way to just snap people back to reality. And I think we all need to be snapped back into, this is not real, which is why we had a mantra here. If you remember, Twitter's not real. Twitter's not real. You can get 1,000 likes from a tweet and then get none more than on any other tweet that you ever do, or millions of people watch something and then nobody watches it again. This must be what it feels like to be Zack Snyder. People cared for a little while and then they didn't care anymore. And that's often part of life, but it is what it is. Anyway, I am going to dip out before a holy war breaks out here on this channel, because I'm looking at the backstage going, what is happening right now? Anyway,
Well, we knew that when we tackled this kind of topic, but it's so important that we do so, because it's the future of the new media that's at stake here, and I think that's what Peterson's at. We'll get back to it. So, Paul, I think what's happening is I think there's kind of a civil war going on inside the new media, and there are those who will use the new media for their own purposes beyond what's healthy and appropriate. They break through these boundaries, and I think that's what Peterson is touching on, and I think he's going to take extreme backlash for it. I don't know how this will play out, but the reason this is so important is because the new media, I think, is going to take over the legacy media. I think the legacy media is already gone. So right now, as this new medium, a new delivery system, I guess, of YouTube and Rumble and X and all of that, as that expands and grows exponentially, the power and the communication megaphone increases exponentially along with it. And so I think there's a battle for how do we ensure that this new media is used to do something good and to bring good ideas and logic and all of that to the folks out there, and is not co-opted. And I don't even know, Paul, you may say it's nobody's business whether it's co-opted. I don't know what your thoughts are. Share, please.
Wow. So there's a bunch of things going on. I think, number one, you need a well-educated population. And we're losing that battle, it seems. If you don't have a well-educated population, then, and here in Toronto, I've had discussions with teachers, a couple teachers, I won't say, it's not a massive survey, who said that their number one job was to make their kids activists. So I'm having huge battles with teachers here in Toronto, with the TDSB and the different organizations who have kind of, I believe, have lost their way and have forgotten what it is to their number one job. So to me, a well-educated population that is inoculated against the BS is our number one, is the number one way to deal with things. My biggest problem is that we're dumbing down the population. I think social media is dumbing things down. I think the attachment to devices is dumbing things down. I'm not really that positive as to just where we're heading. That doesn't mean there aren't incredibly smart people. That doesn't mean there are people, young people out there who are able to read between the lines and see where the lies are within the context of what they're living in now. So I'm not going to be this old man yelling at clouds saying that, it's a complete loss. No, we're going to get a new generation of people who are going to be able to detect the BS within, on their own terms. That is going to happen, and I'm looking forward to hearing them. It's not going. You can only listen to us old folks enough, too much. But I think one of the things that Sam Harris said, and he has gone through an interesting arc. I mean, all these intellectuals, they're loved and hated and then kind of loved, and you could be too big for your own good, and then suddenly you're sniffing your own farts.
Well, he sacrificed. Sam Harris was built, his personality and his brand was built on the idea of logic, right?
Right, and then he went crazy.
He sacrificed it at the feet of politics, and it was like, well, there goes that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you as someone who does like them and still does like them. Again, I try not to shoot the messenger no matter who they are. I try to listen to what it is that they say, and either I believe in what it is that they say or I don't. And that's actually one of the things, I mean, as a comedian, you learn to do that. If you're part of a tribe, you're not allowed to do that. The catechism is clear. You cannot believe what the other side is saying or you'll be excommunicated.
Right.
But one of the things that Sam Harris said that I thought was brilliant was that, and I'm going to paraphrase, if the intellectuals don't fix the problems they created, then exactly the people you hate the most will fix it for you. Yes. And that's kind of what's happened on the right, is that the intellectual left have created all these things. I won't go through them. Kerry knows them extremely well. And what's happened is that all the people they hate the most are now working on trying to solve these issues, which is why Trump got elected, and which is why the Democrats can't figure out what the hell they're doing. And if they keep doing what they're doing, supporting male bodies in women's spaces, just to stick it to the Republicans, they're never going to win another election. So and then finally, and so then the two more things I want to bring up. Number one is I think even though he stumbled a bit, Douglas Murray made a very good point on the now famous Joe Rogan interview, in that Joe Rogan has got this massive audience of meat eaters, and he brings these funny people on board who have now taken on the mantle of political discourse, specifically around the Middle Eastern war, and you get a lot of disingenuous commentary, and you don't get any pushback, and there really isn't any debate, because the Joe Rogan show isn't really a debate. It's a listening show, which is fine. But then you've got experts, non-experts, everybody's arguing about the wrong thing. But the Middle Eastern war, and that's the second thing I want to bring up just briefly, has really changed the landscape. We don't have enough time to discuss it.
No, but you're right. It's tied into all of this.
And we've got this weird consortium of pro-trans, pro-alphabet, anti-West, anti-American, anti-Israel, like the weirdest group of people that would, under normal conditions, never get together. So I don't know what to make of that. I'd like to ask, Douglas Murray. I've asked Douglas Murray if he would come on my appalling news show and just ask him that question. How did this weird consortium of people get together to ostensibly agree on this one bizarre package of insanity? So,
Kerry, it's interesting. I'm just going to point this out very quickly. Jon Stewart, for a very long time, was packaging jokes with political commentary, and then it was funny until people realized that people were actually getting their political takes from him, and I think that. Not in the same way, because you don't have the same level of snark with some of the more uncontrolled and politically shallow takes that you might get on a long form podcast. But I think there was a little bit of that was starting to happen on Rogan, where you got somebody who's funny and then says something that is not quite fully thought out. And, someone said, oh, well, Douglas Murray is putting on this snide accent. I'm like, no, I think that's just his voice.
What he talks like.
He always talked like that.
He always talks like that.
And you got someone onto Rogan who finally says, there is one thing that you could work on here, and I haven't followed it since then. So there's probably some aspect I'm not thinking about, but it is the opposite side of the problem when you say, well, they don't want you to talk about this, therefore everyone who does talk about it is correct, is the wrong opinion to have.
Yeah, and part of the right side is this attraction to conspiracy theories. Joe Rogan loves Graham Hancock. I cannot stomach the man as a junior scientist, junior archaeologist, junior astronomer, wanted to be a nuclear physicist. I cannot stand some of the clowns Rogan puts on, and he just lets them spew. But again, that's my prejudice and bias.
Something you said about the Paul, about the it's Paul, right?
Yep.
Something you said about the intellectual class and not correcting themselves. One thing about that Douglas Murray, Dave Smith, Joe Rogan episode was that they all agreed on a couple of things, and I think people miss this. And this was the most fascinating part to me. Douglas Murray starts talking to them at the beginning about what he calls some kind of dark and dangerous ideas brewing up, finally, actually brewing up from the fringes of the so-called right? This stuff is growing online. If you don't believe that it's happening, go into the X comments of anyone like myself who even dares talk about it, because it's just full of shut up, you Jewish, see you in suck more Jewish, COC, Christ is king. And I'm like, what is this? Where did this all come from? Right. So he said, this is brewing on the right. And the one point that I thought was so important, Dave Smith actually agreed with that point. Go back and watch the beginning. He said he agreed and said he does see an emerging, he called it racialism. That was Dave Smith's word for it, a racialism that's brewing on the right. So I think that was missed by a lot of people. And the other thing they agreed on is what you said about the intellectual class, Paul. they agreed on, and Dave Murray, Douglas Murray was the first one to bring this up, I think, but they both agreed that the intellectual class, the so-called elite, the journalists, all the institutions that we had put our faith in, that we had put, or at least trust in, completely failed us. The media is the enemy of the people. The institutions failed us. The government, so-called science, TM, Fauci getting up there saying he's science. They lied to us. They pushed propaganda. They completely lost our trust. And you can see that reflected in data. Like, people don't trust these institutions anymore. They all agreed on that. But I think what Douglas Murray was trying to say, and that they weren't quite grasping, or maybe they even outright disagree with, is he was trying to say, you are the media now. Do you understand? So at one point, Dave Smith said, well, these powerful institutions, they need to blah, blah, blah. And Douglas Murray says, you have power.
Right.
You, the new media is crushing the old media, and for good reason. They betrayed us. And so he's saying, basically, it's the Spider-Man thing. With great power comes great responsibility. We're all responsible for the words that come out of our mouth. I believe this as a Christian. Our word means something. We will be held to account by the Creator. So he's sort of saying, you have the power. Don't fall into the same mistakes that the leftist establishment did. They failed. They didn't meet the standards. We should try to meet the standards. We shouldn't just discard the standards. We should try to meet them. So they failed us. They lied to us. So you have power now. And what are you going to do with it? And it's up to you to people. When I talk about this and people say, well, Carrie, who gets to set the standard? You figure that out. That's the cross we each individually bear, but you're responsible for what you're putting out into the world. And he's just saying, think about it,
Let's take
Coming up next, we're going to be talking with 5 comedians who will be discussing Bolshevism.
Sorry, I got so serious there.
No, Carrie, that was
funny.
Let me try to simplify on what Peterson is saying here at some risk. So Peterson lays out what he views as being a potential saboteur in mass of the new media, and what are we here for, folks? We want the new media to thrive because we saw what happened when it was held behind a gate, and now we want it to be democratized. Okay, so Peterson's saying in his view, and he's getting major backlash, that in his view, there are saboteurs who will destroy the new media. That's a big deal to us. So here's what I would suggest to make this really easy for folks out there. And panel, you let me know if you agree with this or disagree. I would say that there are 3 factors at play here that are driving what could be highly negative forces in the new media. And that is, 1, that they gain audience through nonstop conflict. And we know that conflict drives viewership. The problem is when you go into manufacturing the conflict, when conflict doesn't exist and you make it up in order to have it be there. The second thing I would say is that resentment also drives viewership.
Yes.
The problem is that resentment was aimed probably appropriately towards the left and towards authoritarianism. Now that has been vanquished, the effort, I believe, is to find new places and new people to aim the resentment to drive, the Inquisition. There you go, English pro.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes.
So the problem is monetization. Joe Rogan, and I believe this is my interpretation, in a very disingenuous way, is on X, actually posting commentary that is critical of what went on with the Douglas Murray episode, and you take a look at his numbers, he is monetizing that on his own behalf. Like, yes, it does give the aura of him conveying that there are people with differing opinions about his show or what he did on his show, but I'm viewing that very cynically because of monetization, and I don't participate. I'm not clicking on that because I'm not going to give him my 1,000th of a cent or whatever it is to be part of it. But you see the volume that he gets on those things. So I think he's being actually disingenuous. I do not believe that he is interested in any kind of dialogue with those remarks, which is one of the things I was promoted with Elon, he didn't listen to me, is that anybody who posts something, if they don't comment or respond to anybody based on those comments, they should lose their monetization or have it drastically reduced. So if you just put the poop, light it on fire, and stick it in front of someone's door to come out and step on it, well, then you're not going to get rewarded for it. That's my
the monetization system on X is very poorly conceived. Like,
yeah, and it encourages bad actors.
Yes, it's awful. So, and
Anyway,
that needs to be
point. That's my response to that.
So the three things that I see that are dangerous is the insatiable desire for conflict to drive viewership, the insatiable desire for resentment to drive viewership, and then we're in a post-proven conspiracy environment where the whole world was being driven by conspiracies, and so you could say, well, that's good that you've brought all that to light, and well, definitely it is, but it's also the case apparently that once you exit those conspiracies and you've brought them to light, now people see conspiracies everywhere. Now, there are still some conspiracies that exist, obviously.
Sure.
But there are also charlatans who know how to take advantage of that after you've come out of a pandemic and after you've come out of, controlled government, operations, let's say. When you come out of that now, they know how to take the resentment, the conflict, and the conspiracy environment and combine that all into a way to drive mistruths and to drive a very ugly version of entertainment that goes right back into tribalism once again.
Perfect. Yeah, agreed.
Vash, disagree with me. Prove me wrong. No, I saw Carrie. Carrie was ready to go.
That's the thing. Tribalism for sure. I mean, these are old. The effort to undermine new media goes back a long ways. And you mentioned the pandemic. People might remember a movement that, could be characterized by the 17th letter of the alphabet. Or maybe if you don't immediately recognize that, release the Kraken, trust the plan, all those kind of things. An effort to undermine legitimate efforts to perhaps do some election reform right there. Again, all undermined by commentary from certain individuals who maybe necessarily weren't aligned with those interests. And so, definitely this effort to undermine new media has been going on for quite some time. And it's just why, look, if you have somebody spouting out something that comports with your worldview or comports with what you want to hear, you should be not just skeptical, but maybe twice as skeptical as you normally would, because perhaps there is an attempt to influence you there down a dark path that might be pretty bad. I want to go ahead and share this story just real fast right here. I remember when this article was published by the Orlando Sentinel, I was like, that's something that they wouldn't necessarily publish normally. Why are they doing this? But I remember the chilling effect this article actually had on a movement back in 2021, as you can see right there, to maybe disagree with what Disney was actually doing and its theme parks at that time. And anybody who was against what Disney was actually doing at this point, like changing the dress code, for example, and all of that, well, you didn't hear much of them after this article was published, because everybody lambasted both the Orlando Sentinel and this particular writer for actually positing this right here. Also, too, we do a lot on that Park Place Network, WDW Pro Show, and others in order to be as accurate as we possibly can. And because accuracy is part of earning your trust. And we know that there are people that are looking to undermine certain movements. We know that there are people that are looking to influence culture in a negative light, and we don't want to be considered those types of individuals. We really are attempting to earn your trust through what we actually report and how we report it. So hopefully we have done that. But again, somebody who is saying something, especially if they're blaming like an ethno-religion, for example, or something to that effect, definitely be skeptical for sure. But even if it comports with your worldview, twice as skeptical is the mantra of the day, I would say.
YouTube thumbnails are evil.
Folks, in summary, as you find your new media personalities, aim away from resentment. That would be a good first step. Don't go towards.
Amen.
Yeah, that's a great way to fall away, is to go towards resentment. You know, we really hope that you felt this video was satisfactual. We know we had an actual good time participating and communicating with each and every one of you out there listening. It is a great honor. It is a great pleasure, even a responsibility to do this on a daily basis. You give us the dream job we love doing, and for that we can never say thank you enough. There's only one small favor we ask beyond what has already been done, and that is, folks, consider it. That is clicking the like button. Share, subscribe, click it, stick it to those pesky algorithms. It's the notification bell. And drop a comment right on down below. Let us know your thoughts, because your thoughts do indeed matter, no matter what the mainstream media would otherwise say. Folks, as we say every single time we end these videos, because we mean it, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Hey, Floral, guess what?
You put a fork in Pro's microwave again.
No, that was yesterday.
I don't know that what.
Oh, I've decided to give up on torturing Jonas.
What? Why? In the same way the cat sleeps like 20 hours a day, that was like your purpose.
I know, but I've decided there's bigger fish to fry.
Okay.
Like Lorne. I mean, think about it. Everybody loves him. He's a fan favorite, and frankly, he has almost no weaknesses I can find. Except that he's really smart.
So, you want to annoy the one panelist without a single flaw, because he's smart.
Yeah, like that winged statue at that fancy Paris museum thingy. I want to break the one thing that everyone loves most.
So, kind of like the opposite of Rachel Zegler.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I get to see her all the time at family reunions anyway.
You get to see Rachel Zegler?
Yeah. I mean, she's a total troll. Lives under a bridge, harasses billy goats, you know, the whole 9 yards.
It all makes sense now.
Speaking of which, maybe she'll get me... okay, call her on my... I'm gonna call her and see if she'll be in the next Indiana Jones. She should be the next Indiana Jones. That'll totally destroy Lord. He loves Indiana Jones.
Oh, that's cruel.
Hey, Rach. I've got a cool idea for you that involves a whip and snakes.
I love that description. It's perfect.
I know, right? Weird, as we always say.